Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome to 3:22 in the morning. And I got the beanie on, and of course, the Carhartt sweatshirt, because your boy has put that work in. Because today, it's not a normal part 3, it's not a part 4, but it's both put together with everything I listened to this month. And oh my goodness, it's freaking hot in here. Yeah, I didn't need to put in that much work for this video, but shoot, I put the work in. I just wanted to show it off. But you know what? 30 albums. 60 great albums this video. And here's what I'm kind of going to do today. So I'm going to cover the albums that I said for part 3 and for part 4 that I already gave at the beginning of the series. So I'm going to review those and basically do what I've been doing. But also this month, I've been listening to a lot of extra content. And to give you guys some extra recommendations, this video, and I'm going to include this in the title, you're going to see 60 great black metal listens. And I'm recording this currently November 30th, 3:20 in the morning. And I think I'm at 58 total things for this episode. So here's the thing. 2 of these things here are going to be out basically in the editing process. I'm going to post 2 extra things, and I've got 5 more on my listening list. I don't really have any surprise that something's going to be good. But hey, let's get started on the actual reviews. Let's cover some heat. Let's cover some gas. Because I don't want to delay anymore, because it's almost 3:30 in the morning. And we're starting off with Leshy. Leshy is it's a Russian band. They dropped this demo. I don't know what to call it. Filthy Dreams, Effing Dreams. That's what I thought it was called. But I don't really feel like looking up a direct translation again. But here's what you gotta know. Do you like RH07? Then you're gonna like Leshy. It's just a more raw version of that. It's a combo of really riffy, slightly punk-oriented black metal and some really cool ambient texture. Honestly, it's one of the most varied albums here. Every track conveys something a little bit different. It sounds really interesting. It's got some hugely tortured vocals, which sounds sick, and the emotions over this thing have a really cool variety that I find a lot of enjoyment in. The 4th track on here is honestly super crusty, which I think is awesome. It's honestly an album you get really pumped to, even though it's under a half hour. It's heavy, it's really interesting, it's energetic, it's honestly great. It's worth the hype. If you're into raw black metal, this is certainly something you'll like. And after that, we get a Greek release, one of the eclectic ones in my idea. This is Fiendish Nymphs Aeneon. And this is a necrotic release. It's got excellent sounding bass, these synth textures that really fill the gaps in a really good way. And you got this female singing that's actually really solid. Like, a lot of bands kind of flop with this thing, but here it works really well. It's a really strange album. It's certainly subdued, but it's one of those that kind of just has something about it. Like, it's kind of hard to really even tell what's so enjoyable about this thing, as it's just so eccentric and all over the place. It's kind of groundbreaking. It is kind of like Rotting Christ's first album, where it's just, you don't know where it's coming from, but it's different from that, where the style isn't just heavy metal and it being unique like that. It's actually doing something super cool. Honestly, it's an album that doesn't even feel real, which is maybe by accident. Like, maybe it isn't meant to feel so absurdly mystical, but like, it's a one-of-a-kind of experience. It's honestly great. And up next, we got a popular band's less popular pick with Drutsk, or Druth, if you're going by Lord of the Rings pronunciation, with The Swan Road. This is in between the debut and the second album, and it's really underrated. It's certainly a bit more on the clean end, just slightly, and every song, as atmospheric as it is and as repetitive as it is, it works really well. The association with Hate Forest really makes a lot of sense, as you get these atmospheric riffs that really just drive forward a really lush sound compared to Hate Forest's more biting, cold sound. It's prideful. It's even a bit beautiful. It's just as life-affirming as the earlier 2 albums. And the first main track on the album is honestly really awesome, how it moves between different emotions, and it's got almost a progressive edge to the whole thing. Even though it's atmospheric black metal, it's not going to feel that progressive. Glare of 1768 has one of the coolest, weirdest riffs ever. It's not exactly like too out there if you listen to a bunch, but like, it's the way it sticks makes it more notable. There's some updated folky riffs on occasion, feels more folky than the first two albums. And honestly, the way I described the first track, you could kind of make that argument for every track here. They all have weird, mournful, prideful energy, honestly, like some NSBM does, but I don't think this is NSBM. So honestly, very underrated listen. I thought it was quite beautiful. Good driving music. It's kind of great in general. Listen to it. And of course, I gotta cover some vampiric black metal this time. You're gonna hear a lot about that today. Unholy Vampiric Slaughter Sect with The World Trapped in Vampiric Sway. It's banger. It's seriously a banger. Like, first of all, you take this crusty kind of raw black metal sound and you throw in industrial, like filthy industrial. It's certainly heavy too. You almost have like an old school death metal influence on a few of these riffs, but the call and responses are just breakneck speed. Like, you could argue there's maybe a little bit of grind in here because it's just so odd the way it's composed. And if the dissonant riffs weren't enough for you, you get electro industrial parts, which you'd expect for black metal to have a heavier, more traditional industrial style, but this electro industrial stuff that almost touches upon like Nine Inch Nails, it's so sick and heavy and grimy. The misanthropic themes of this album are really coupled well with these industrial style breakdowns, like really percussive and heavy stuff. It's like all the heaviness comes from non-metallic origins, or actually metallic origins if you want to be literal. And some of the riffs are far more punky, giving this an ultimately a very entertaining experience. Honestly, it might be more entertaining than in terms of quality, but I couldn't notice it was just entertaining. It's so much going on here, and the punky riffs and the death metal riffs, it's a lot going on. For 24 minutes, there's a lot going on. I think it's great. And then we get a re-listen here, one I haven't discussed on this channel as of yet. Burzum, Det Som En Gang Var. Gotta cover the Lord of the Rings stuff, and this one's a banger. A lot of people claim that this is the best Burzum album, and it's not hard to see why. Of the first 4 albums, the worst one I'd say is the debut, just because of War. I think War is a goofy song, and the rest of the songs are all really great. Honestly, really great, sort of dark, cosmic sounding, sort of dipping into atmospheric black metal. A lot of really cool stuff going on in that first album. It's really raw, really crunchy, great guitar tone. But Det Som En Gang Var is so much more realized, riff heavy, even progressive in terms of the genre. It's really forward thinking. Come on, Key to the Gate. Come on. And also, you got some real dungeon synth interludes here, where Burzum already had some banger interludes like the Crying Orc off of Self-Titled, but here you got, just that one is just so funky. It's awesome. There's a little bit of clean singing, so many bar chords. And that's how it should be. And it's either despite or because of it, but the simplicity is mesmerizing. And the song Sna Mikrokosmos Tessin. It's a 9-minute long banger, and it is a banger. It really evokes some of the stuff you'd see more on Hvislosett to Oss, the third Burzum album, with how dark it is, how atmospheric it is. That being said, Key to the Gate is one of the best songs of all time. This album's crazy. Why are you wasting your time? Go listen to it. Next, you get Divisor with Unspeakable Cults. More like unspeakably bad. Dude, these symphonic elements are garbage. The production is garbage. Everyone likes this album. You need to get your hearing checked, man. Yeah, it blows. I'm not even going to waste my time on it, because you know what you should be checking out? Transcending Bizarre's The Four Scissors. I'm sorry. Transcending Bizarre? That's the band name. It's a question. But there's no question as to how great it is. This thing's got drum and bass on the first track. Every track here is insane. There's a little bit of clean singing in there. It's nuts. Genuinely, it's nuts. Is it as crazy as like modern stuff like Plunderphonics or like 100 Gex or something like that? Probably not, but like, and here's the thing. I mentioned this about Unholy Vampiric Slaughter Sect. It's one of those albums that might just be more entertainment value than quality, but there's so much entertainment value. Check out Transcending Bizarre instead of Divisor. I don't care to talk about that one, but Transcending Bizarre is banger. And then we got Chaos Moon's Languor Into Echoes Beyond. This is a funeral doom. Well, I thought so. It's not really much funeral doom. It's more like a really dark, atmospheric black metal album, and it's hard to pin down. It's the only album on this whole chart I'm actually planning on re-listening to anytime soon, and not for enjoyment reasons, but to just see how much I really, really like it. Because I like it. I do. I just don't know by how much. It's cool. There's a cool ambient twist to the whole thing, and I love the fade outs between more logical and illogical samples. It feels very abstract. It's seriously such a wash. It's an album that the feeling is really hard to replicate, and I'm sure you couldn't do it just by enjoying this thing. You need some really unique and bizarre inspiration to just have this just total psychedelic experience with this thing. It really just blends your mind up. There's a lot of weirdness on this album that's really subtle, but it's just hard to explain. This is just an album that's hard to devise, no pun intended. The effects on this thing are crazy. Every track is just decimated. If the band could actually do this live, I'd be shocked. And I know some people don't love studio effects that much, but I do. I think this album's kind of great. It's just such a weird wash. It reminds me of Murmure, which we will talk about, or even Paysage d'Hiver, where it will just fade in and out of stuff without a care in the world, except it's so much care because it actually works really well. Next, we're covering Leviathan. Yeah, massive conspiracy against all life. I'm gonna be completely honest. A lot of people love this album. And Leviathan, the first two albums are incredible. And then after that, there was, of course, Lurker of Chalice. And then this was rumored to be the second Lurker of Chalice album. That just never really happened. For those of you who don't know, Leviathan and Lurker of Chalice are the same man, Jeff Whitehead, aka Rest. And what we got here is a little different. It does have some really slow, doomy moments, kind of like Lurker of Chalice, but the depressing angle is honestly kind of alienated and removed. That being said, there are a lot of more straightforward riffs on this thing, but they're just insane riffs as well. And you get when people say like disgust at like anything and sort of at pride, you understand why it's called disgust. Like, there is a gross feeling about this album with just how hateful it is. Layered, harsh vocals with tons of effects sounds awesome. Merging with swords unto them is not only the greatest song title of all time, but it's like a blackened post-rock thing here. The way it just builds and sounds so horrid. There's a lot of really cool sections to it. Certainly a touch of ambient here, but this is actually more of a banger than the first two black metal albums and Lurker of Chalice's, or Leviathan's discography. Oops. It is a loathsome experience, but I don't loathe this album. It's genuinely great. I mean, I didn't have a doubt in my mind I'd be giving Leviathan a great on this chart. It's just this one it's not as popular as the first album. I knew I was going to like the second album more. I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little disappointed because I expected the best thing ever. And it's just, it only blew me away a little bit. Up next is Hate Forest's Sorrow. Hate Forest and I don't get along too well. I have never been super into Hate Forest. It's one of those NSBM adjacent bands that I've just never really vibed with. But here I do, because it is, some people describe Darkthrone's Transylvanian Hunger as one song, how it just goes on and on with the really rawness and how it all goes into each other. This is an album just like that. Every song goes into the next one, and it is just a flurry of atmospheric black metal riffs, blast beats to no end. It is just dissonant enough to be interesting the whole time. Honestly, there aren't even that many riffs. It's like 2 per song, but it's really sick. It's for like a 33 or so minute album. The way it just stacks 1 or 2 riffs a song in this winding tour of hate and pride, it's crazy. It's a very simple album, but it works really well. I guess Ukraine loves their simple style black metal, and it works really well. It's mesmerizing. It's super mesmerizing, and it's great. I like this atmospheric style of black metal here. I think it works. And up next, we're covering a new album, Fantafaxath's Hive Mind Necrosis, Narcosis. Sorry, I believe I pronounced that wrong on the roster list a while back, but no matter, this thing is a banger. It's one I will have to re-listen to for probably my album of the year list because it's so cool and progressive. It's maybe one of the hardest to play albums in black metal that I've heard, other than like Dissection, but I don't care for Dissection. Do you like Oranssi Pazuzu? Here you go. That could be the whole review, but people talk about the kicks on this thing. Crazy. Seriously, the drummer on this thing is nuts. As much as the riffs are fantastic, the drumming is so bizarre, especially the first track. Fantano talked about this. This is one of the only Fantano videos I watch this year, and it's just the kicks changing in tempo underneath all this stuff, and the whole thing just warping in and out of tempo. It's nauseating in the most interesting way possible. The drumming, the weird tempos that change, time signatures, prog-isms, it's a really cool thing going on here, and I really can't blame the kind of clean-ish production. It's not horrid. It actually benefits the sound really well. It sounds cool and psychedelic. It's genuinely worth the hype. It's great, and not only that, it's impressive. And after that, we have Mortuary Drapes, All the Witches Dance. I am sorry, I don't love it. I mean, I like it, and I have to say, I've liked Mortuary Drape in the past. I like their self-titled EP, and this is similar. Thrashy black metal, certainly diving into the atmosphere. The opening track is really cool. It feels actually inspired a little bit by, I'd say, a band like Goblin, specifically the Suspiria soundtrack. Shout out, one of the best soundtracks ever. But this one, I think there's kind of some lacking in energy after you reach the first track. I honestly like this album mostly for the least metal parts, like the interludes or the non-distorted guitar parts. And honestly, it's the rhythm guitar on this album that really lacks. The lead guitar is fantastic. He plays some of the best lead parts in black metal, but it's the rhythm guitar that lets me down. So honestly, there are moments of genuine brilliance on this thing, but I think overall it's kind of lacking. And so I have to replace it, and this might be a bit cheating. It's only 26 minutes long, and who even knows if it's actually black metal. Bathory, self-titled. I listened to it for the first time this year. I know. It's been a long time coming. I've heard the other 3 black metal era Bathory albums. I love all of them. And if you want really thrashy, aggressive black metal with cool production, then here you go. There are some tracks on here with some decent riffs, but Quorthon's voice is really one of the highlights here. It's really awesome. It's really grim. It's fun to listen to. You could say it birthed the genre, and I just felt like covering it. And up next, we're going into another Greek band, and not the band's most popular album. This is Vargathron's Walpurgisnacht. That all being said, I'm not covering it because it's not as popular an album. I'm covering because I felt like it. So if you like the blackened heavy metal approach of a Rotting Christ, but you want more traditional melodic black metal style sections that are far more gratifying to the ear, here you go. It takes all these parts and just smushes them together. The song Tragenda, I believe it's pronounced, I don't know, my notes are bad, has really cool dynamics, which makes it honestly a highlight on the whole album. The heavy metal sections feel very meditative, the way they kind of pull back a little bit in energy. The whole thing actually feels a little bit meditative, which is a really interesting take on this sort of Greek style that has kind of been struggling to be meditative so far. It just kind of feels lame, but here it's not lame. It's cool. It's a classic for a reason. I think it's great. And next we got a popular band's less popular pick, Behemoth's Pandemonic Incantations. This is an album before they totally turned into death metal, but it's after their epic, awesome black metal period that I have not listened to, but everyone says it's great. And of course we know them today for making black death metal that is okay. It's not amazing, and we're talking about an album today that decided to get a lift into just to see what it's about. And other than the fact that it is a 1-to-1 blend of old school death metal, specifically bands like, I don't know, Morbid Angel and their own little style of black metal here, character-wise, not a ton going on, but there is a lot of energy. There's also some clean guitar, clean vocals, symphonic elements. Honestly, the weakest part here is the death metal influence. It's just kind of lacking in general. It's just not heavy enough to sound heavy, and the black metal parts weren't sounding very evil, so instead you want the riffy parts, which is what they wrote. So that's the value you get out of this thing, are the black metal riffs. They're solid. Nurgle knew how to do that. Moments of aggression and pride and, dare I say, brilliance. Solid, creative riffs, and at the end of the day, it's kind of all that matters. So I think this one's good. But if you want an album that's better and is really just like dipping into war metal, just a hellish experience, I gotta recommend this one band that's been on my radar for a long time now, and I just finally listened to them. Omega Vortex with Black Abomination Spawn. This thing is furious. It's dissonant. Everything sounds like nails. I don't even got a ton to say about it, except that it's just such a banger that I got like 5 hours of sleep the morning before listening to this thing walking to work, and I felt like I could just ruin the day for everyone else. I felt like I was that strong, and I was that strong, and I just was that powerful just in general. You know, I got filled with the spirit of Varg. Just hit him with the 23 stab wounds in self-defense. You know, make a difference out there, change the world. But after that, you know, we're going to talk about something a little more American. Tra with Endle Toneg. Yes, super bizarre name aside, here you got a Tra album. The band Tra, Damien Thet Aleph, whatever you want to call the man, loves to blend one-to-one black metal and ambient and give them a little kiss for something like this. And this one is Red, and it is very emotional, it's very powerful, and it goes in between these sections without a care in the world, and it's kind of awesome. It's not a single song, but it feels kind of like it, how the way it just weaves in between these sections. You could say it's one like over 40-minute suite. There's some really cool sections where it's just blast beats underneath ambient synths that goes crazy. The title track is just sublime, truly incredible stuff. I love how this album makes you take a really uncomfortable look at your own life. It's got like a weird blend of nostalgia and some really uncomfortable vibes. It's really interesting. It's one of the most introspective records on this whole thing. I'm a big fan of Tra. I think this album's great. And last one for this little section of 15, Bathory's Blood, Fire, Death, a re-listen. Wow, I can't believe I ever didn't love this thing. Yes, the snare is just as sharp as I remember, but it doesn't really bother me because the riffs are awesome. It's so epic and progressive and climactic, a little bit folky. The way it all builds on itself is super impressive. It's such a cool album because it's catchy and innovative. It's one that, honestly, kind of broke into the mainstream a little bit. The way it's sort of like seen as this forerunner of black metal that everyone can listen to, maybe not everybody, but you show any music enjoyer of any genre and you show this to them, and other than the drum sound, I think they'll really like it. That's what I thought years back. It's so different from second wave black metal, and yet the progressions, the epic climactic melodies, it has a lot of charm to it. It is far more epic than any first wave black metal or any thrash metal as thrashy in black metal as it is. The acoustic guitar and synth bits are insane for the time. Insanely influential record here, and the synths and acoustic guitar, dude, would we have Ulver without either of those? I could have named like 100 bands there, but name your favorite band and would you have them without Blood, Fire, Death? The answer is no, and it's great. I'd be beating around the bush if I said something else, or I'd be wrong. Yeah, but is great. If you don't know it, you have to. And it's a new day. I'll admit, it's the next night now. I thought I could put that work in, but wasn't worthy of the Carhartt shirt. So, you know, representing my boys Gloam Gozer, because, you know, I'm transitioning out of the black metal month with a transitionary semi-black metal album that transitions into or out of black metal, depending on how you see it. And, let's get back into it. Nachtlick, self-titled. You know, this is a Canadian black metal album with some pretty interesting elements. It's got a lot of dungeon synth going on, and I kind of like dungeon synth as long as it's attached to black metal. That is a whole subject for like so many other videos. There's sometimes I like dungeon synth. I've said that many times. This one's cool because it's got a mix between sort of a groovy style and a creepy style. And what I like a lot about that is that it blends it in a way that is done really well. Nice synthesizers. The whole thing has a bit of a gothic twist overall, which goth and dungeon synth, I never thought I'd see the day. It's seriously impressive the way it is so doom-laden. The atmosphere is so pervasive despite such an eclectic mix of genres here. It is very atmospheric, and at times it even feels like depressive suicidal black metal. So I can't lie, it's a really impressive album. The synths work so well with it. I think you guys should try and see what kind of atmosphere it evokes for yourself. But for me, I think it's great. It's kind of a Canadian modern, I like it. And after that, we have a sort of black thrash album here, Destroyer 666's Unchain the Wolves, a super blasphemous record here from Australia. Australia, really an unsung black metal scene, and as much as people hearken this thing as a big death or black thrash album here, the thrashy elements aren't really more like, they're not like Demolition Hammer, they're not as much like Slayer, they're more grand and really prideful and even like loud and very proud. You know, they're prideful. There's sort of a Bathory-esque atmosphere to this whole thing of just like evil, but it's very atmospheric. It's real tough guy music. You know, this is stuff to really lift to, despite the lack of thrash metal percussiveness. That is one thing that this album kind of made me feel a little weird about. It's so thrash metal influenced, and yet the percussiveness of that genre isn't as much there. There are reverb soaked growls, and despite that, they sound amazing, and they have actually pretty clear vocal lines. You could kind of tell what he's saying. Of course, because it's in English, I am a little bit biased. There are a lot of dope pick slides, and it's certainly heavy. It's not afraid of some more mid-paced grooviness that I really like. Every song is a little bit different, and I like how they have such a nice sense of melodicism to the whole thing. It's inspiring and epic, thrashy at times, of course. There are a lot of really nice guitar solos, and the title track is just incredible. It's dark, and it's epic. It's great. It's a classic for a reason. In terms of the Australian scene, well, there goes a chance of covering Australia in a future year, because this is just so critical. And after that, we have Necromantia with Scarlet Evil Witching Black. This is a Greek album, and gee, Bill, your mom let you have 2 basses? Yeah, a 6-string and a 4-string bass guitar. This thing sounds nuts. That being said, if you listen to this and you've never listened to that many black metal albums and you're not that familiar with the genre, it might just go over your head and just as just a really, really solid symphonic black metal album from Greece, or even just a black metal album that has these weird horn textures if you don't know that much about black metal. But it's the real texture of the bass. It's kind of the opposite of most black metal albums. I have heard black metal with no bass, 1 guitar, no stringed instruments, except for like feedback, but never have I heard 2 basses. Of course, I think the 2 guitar, no bass setup is kind of silly, but 2 basses really adds a really interesting idea. You know, you get a lot of really thick texture with the higher stuff that the bass is playing. It's a really melodic riffing style that just fits together super nicely. It's never in any direction of like too technical, but it sounds really nice. And the symphonic angle is really impressive because it's not at all overdone. It's actually really, really moody. There's some real heft to the tone of this whole thing, which is intrinsic to the idea of this band. It's really melodic and really intricate, but occasionally it feels pretty doomy, which is a thing that I really like. I think this album is great. You know, as of all the Greek symphonic albums, this is the one to listen to. It's not eclectic like some of my albums that I actually probably like a little bit more than it, but it sounds super cool. I mean, album cover aside, I really don't like the album cover. It's just too out there. It's trying to be too flashy. Black metal shouldn't be like that. I like my subdued, my darkness, my obscurity, my black and white. But, you know, go listen to it. You might enjoy it. And after this is Rubber Witches. I don't even know how to pronounce this thing. Masturbations Malveillantes, MMXVII, if that's even close to what it is. But this is an industrial tinged black metal album, and it's super sick. It's dissonant and super unnerving, really heavy stuff. It feels genuinely disgusting. Maybe not as much as like Impaled Nazarene, where that's so outwardly disgusting, but it feels as perverted as it sounds. There's some really cool guitar noise that just bolsters the mix of the whole thing, and the harmonics added into it are really nice. There are even some ambient textures that sound really sick. There are a lot of distorted vocals as well, which I think is an element that's kind of underutilized in black metal. Distortion on vocals does work sometimes. There are also moments of like this isolated, murky bass tone that gives you a lot of extra sort of disturbing qualities to the atmosphere. The guitar has a really cool mix of like old school death metal, hard-hitting percussive stuff, and a more ambient and textured tone that doesn't care that much for riffs. I mean, it has a melody, but it's not as explosive. But
this thing is honestly kind of great. It's kind of modern and it's got a really cool production style. I think aesthetically, it fits into sort of a modern idea of black metal without super going against the grain in a way that like harms the idea. And up next we have Xasthur with his new album. This is a recent release with Inevitably Dark. Now, Xasthur has really good vocals. What if he just didn't put them on his albums? How would you feel about that? Well, that's kind of how I feel about this thing here. This Xasthur album, listening wise, not an amazing experience. It is a long album, like an hour 20 minutes, I don't even remember, and it's really psychedelic and weird. The way it goes through these weird folk passages, these weird synth passages, and these more hardcore black metal portions, with a super raw and disgusting set of tones, and yet super crisp, clean production. It is 100% wrong, but it feels so disturbing and sickening, and that's gotta be on purpose. I just talked about Rubber Witch being disturbing, and you really think Xasthur doesn't know how to do that? I mean, sure, the dude might have lost a little bit of his touch in his age or whatever, but like this thing, it really has the vibe to it. And I think how outwardly harmful the whole thing is its true purpose as a piece of art. You know, it's not a lot of times I criticize something as an art form on this channel, but the Xasthur release, and that's just not just sucking up because it's a popular band and a band I actually quite enjoy. It is genuinely a work of art here, despite not being the most enjoyable thing in the world. This is an album that I could say is great to appreciate, but to enjoy, it's just okay. Now, if you want something that goes both ways, I recommend this kind of hidden band. I actually added this picture to Top Streams myself. The band has some things going on, but Norman Westberg of Swans joined for this project. This is, and to be honest with you guys, this is kind of cheating. You might consider it a DQ on your own time, but there are some black metal riffs on this whole thing, so I decided, whatever. This is a band known as Tela S Therion, and this specific album is Tela S Therion with AAVV, and the album, it's abbreviated, but it's verb period D period SVM space CST Arcan, and this describes itself as acousmatic black metal. This is a band that's dropped maybe like 4 albums this year, and I've only heard this one, and it's certainly a band I'll have to listen to more. If I was going to give some crazy, weird, psychedelic ending to this series again, I would probably do this one. And you know what? It speaks for itself. I don't have to do any weird editing gimmicks. Maybe I'll throw something in silly here or there, but this thing's awesome. If you like the noisier bits of like Swans or Norman Westberg's solo work even, you're going to like this thing. There are like 4 guitarists, 2 drummers, a saxophone, trombone. There's so many instrument players on this whole thing. That being said, don't expect a lot of blast beats, don't expect that much tremolo riffs, and the vocals apparently aren't real. Yeah, acousmatic, for those of you who don't know, and don't feel bad, I didn't know until I looked it up after reading the description of this album, so it's really not that known. It's kind of like binaural beats, how you'll have 2 different things played in your ears and they sort of fit a different thing in your head, but it not binaural beats. It's like 2 different things doing that, and apparently the vocals don't actually exist, and it succeeds. I genuinely think there's some form of vocals on here, or at least something that really replicates vocals, and there are points within these 2 tracks here that you reach actual black metal riffing deep under the bowels in the underbelly of these tracks. You're swamped in noise and really just strained harmonies, such dissonance, and then you hear just the crunchiest metal riffs. Like, this is what people thought of metal in the 70s. Like, this is what people thought about like Nirvana in the 90s. This thing is seriously like harmful, but it's so like empowering at the same time. I'm totally wasting your time by not giving you the time to go listen to it. Just go listen to it. And up next we have Fles with Frenzied Bloodlust Underneath a Black Moon. Vampiric black metal. I can't get enough of this micro genre, if you will. It's more of a style than a genre, but it's such a cool style. This one's a bit more misanthropic than more of the lonely style of vampiric black metal. It is raw, hostile with these weird samples laid throughout these two tracks here. And even though they're two tracks, they're more like two suites of sorts. They have all these various movements, not things that progressive. You know, there are the caveman riffs here and there. There's some cool, really dissonant bar chord, like constructed riffs on this thing that just super crunchy. It's just screeching, growling, and moaning insanity. The atmosphere of this thing is almost indescribable. It is like twisted and doomy. All you need to do is look at the song titles just to tell how misanthropic this whole thing is. And even this like album cover, even if you might think it's a little bit cheesy, if you put a little bit of grain on it, it feels that hostile. It is completely manic. On the flip of a dime, it will switch between the most self-hating to the most misanthropic, like kind of like how Leviathan did that on 10th Sublevel, but so much faster. It's not gradual at all, and yet it works. And you've got a drum machine, of course, but they're the most dismally textured. They're so heavy, but this thing is great. It's kind of a sleeper hit, just 27 minutes, so not even a ton of time, but it's so outwardly hostile and gritty and raw and really, really interesting. And this goes into another Greek album, Zemios in Monumentum. If you like Dio, but you want a bit of a noisier lead guitar, some moody ambience, and no Ronnie James Dio on the vocals, but instead some Greek dude who's screaming black metal vocals, this is what you get. It's another sort of like heavy metal, black metal crossover that the Greeks did a lot, and it suffers as a result. It's not a very consistent subgenre. But on tracks like March of the Giants, you get some really dope dueling guitar moments that I like a lot. And the final track is really dope, how it incorporates acoustic guitar and clean singing. But in all honesty, it's just these lacking mid-paced heavy metal grooves with a black metal texture on top that just kind of reeks of a lack of ingenuity. You know, I'm wanting Ronnie James Dio to sing over this thing instead of some bozo to scream over it, because it just needs more going on. The instrumental is just not interesting enough. I still think there are some moments of genius, but this is just proof, as just a good album, as strong as so many elements of this might be, that the Greek style really isn't that good. That is until you see Agatis's Dawn of Martyrdom, symphonic black metal banger. No, like, all I gotta say about this thing is that it's a banger. The riffs go crazy, production works and is fitted perfectly together. The synths are not cheesy at all. Everything you fear that symphonic black metal might be, non-existent here. It is, seriously, it's a banger. Like, it's got some Inquisition level of aggression. And speaking of Inquisition, Into the Infernal Regions of the Ancient Cult, it's right here. We're talking about it. And it's so good. If you guys don't know, Inquisition from South America, I believe Chile. I'm going to fact check myself on that later. And that's surprising because it's actually one of my favorite black metal bands. And this only helped. Despite it being over an hour long, I was sucked in the entire time. No bass guitar, literally none. Just a guy on guitar and a dude on drums. And the dude on guitar is doing vocals at the same time. And that's Dagon. Dagon has seriously the best riffs in the game, and it all starts on this debut album with the opening track that has a bit more of a traditional black metal style, and then it weaves itself into the actual Inquisition sort of nature that we know of. The riffs get so crazy. There are a lot of arpeggios on this thing, or just like separated chords by individual notes. So many bar chords that are just strummed to have this really scraggly sort of blasted out end to it. It just feels like all these like wires. There are 3 different songs on here that are all 9 minutes long each, and all of them feel completely life affirming with the way they're just such bangers, or just like so moody and interesting. It's got some bass frog vocals. Literally, like, I sound closer to them right now talking like this in this hushed tone than you would trying to do any other black metal band's vocals. He's not even screaming, but it fits so perfectly. It's like kind of apathetic. It's interesting. I certainly believe that it is more simple than later albums, but it is so well done. The pacing of this whole thing is excellent. You know, it doesn't need to be as fast paced as like Bloodshed Upon the Imperial Altar. That might be a song and not an album title. The 2016 album that I covered 2 years ago. But Inquisition has done nothing but grow on me since then. This is a great album. Even though it's their debut, they show a lot of promise here, and they have really never let me down. And up next is a little band called Pharmakeia with their self-titled album, and I don't know where this band is from, And this is an album I'll need to re-listen to because it is just 33 minutes of a blur. It's cool, but it's like dissonant and creepy, but it doesn't feel like Decibel Omega. It's not as well defined as that. It's almost like you got a little bit of ambient texture that sort of ties the whole thing together. It is absolutely surging. It has a crazy amount of energy to the whole thing. You're locked in from the first second to the last one. There are tons of huge momentum on this thing. Like you were just sucked in. And the riffs are simple yet very effective. It's got the sort of Darkthrone, Transylvanian Hunger thing where every song just kind of flows almost like one song. Not quite necessarily, but this one, they all fit together perfectly. It's just a bit over half hour of devastation, and it's a trip. It's really, really great. I'll have to re-listen to it because it was just so weird. But speaking of weird, up next is a re-listen of Mor Murray's self-titled record. This one is like under a half hour, and it's so tied into its ambient textures. Everything is distorted. It's almost like there's no guitar on this thing, but just keyboards sent through a Sun life pedal with the distortion just cranked all the way. This album is so crispy, I want to chew on it, but instead it makes me feel just like Mr. Skeleton right here with a flower crown. The amount of confusion here of every little element, it's like Plunderphonics of black metal. And the drumming is insanely good, you know? It's so dynamic, and it knows exactly where to be a blast beat, or be something chill, or to fill the space in some really innovative way. It's never boring. It reminds me certainly of Grave Flowers, a band I covered the last couple of years. They have a screamo bend to them, but it's not the screamo side, it's the level of mania and like weird emotional peaks. You get a burning hot guitar, crazy ambient textures. This whole thing feels like a fever dream. It's fantastic. It's truly great. If you want a real trip for about 29 minutes, check it out. And up next, we got a war metal album, Tetragrammicide's Primal Incinerators of Moral Matrix. Just a fair warning, this album is super offensive. I think it's like anti-Islamic, but these guys are from India, so I don't know their perspective. But you know, this thing is war metal. People say it's like war noise of the Indian variety that we've had going on so far. And here's the thing about this one. Spoiler alert, it's great. It's really heavy death metal influenced war metal. It's really bulky. You got a lot of really cool little interludes of noise here. But I was expecting something like Brahma Strika, a band I covered, I think last year, where they would have power electronics interlude bits in the middle of their song, and just really heavy stuff. But here you get something a bit more straightforward with a really, really subdued layer of noise underneath the whole thing. That being said, the guitar is decently noisy, the bass fills a lot of space, and the vocals are just thunderous. And I love the tin can snare sound. It's very simple call and responses the whole time. It's like caveman stuff, except it's just so, it just keeps going and going and adding more layers. It's got these really hype, sort of abstract Islamic interludes, which honestly are really cool. I think my favorite thing about this album is how these interludes give this thing a sort of atmosphere. It's no Brahma Strika, but I still think it's great. And the side B material, especially the shorter tracks, are excellent. And up next we got sort of a black noise album here, Emit, A Sword Death for the Prince. This is a band I have never touched upon, and yet they're known for being kind of infamous. Apparently they have something to do with Revorum Ibn Malakt. I don't believe it, but they're kind of cool because it's just black noise. Yeah, there's no guitar on this thing, at least no guitar as you would expect it, you know, it's just feedback looped in some really interesting ways, and some shrieking, of course. It's dark, hateful, hard to discern, confusing, and it's certainly deeply uncomfortable. And I love how every track is just this assault of harsh noise until the final track, which is a black ambient piece that just feels sick. It's like you were fighting so hard against this thing you didn't understand until you reach this ambient piece that is just horrid to your core. And the feelings you get from this thing are so pervasive and interesting. It's raw and really interesting. I think it's great. But that being said, this isn't black metal. I gotta disqualify it. Yeah, I can't believe it either. After last year, we had no disqualifications, and this year, we got one. That being said, I don't think you lose on Nothing But Black Metal November if you listen to a black noise album once. Of course, it like doesn't count towards your black metal, but like part of this month should include some real noise factor. So I think it's a good contributor. That being said, if you want something that I wouldn't DQ from this list, Sutek Hexen with Luciform. Yeah, this is a band I just kind of got into, and that being said, this is kind of cheating here, the way it's so well interwoven of black metal and black noise. And I'm gonna talk about this band some more, but this album right here has some shorter cuts, some really interesting tracks that are heavy on like the power electronic sides, and they just blend in these really crazy guitar riffs out of nowhere, and it leads to a really manic, really intense, highly atmospheric, and just energizing sound, but also it's really sad and interesting. So that's one you might want to check out. And considering the noise train we're going on here, the next thing we're covering is Reverorum ib Malacht's De Mystery Stom Christi CD Rip. Yes, specifically from the CD, the compact disc, not the cassette, not the vinyl. Duke, why does that matter? Because this is 2010, when streaming wasn't that huge yet. But Duke, why are there 3 different versions? I'll tell you, because I couldn't really tell you, but there are 3 different versions. And before I sound too crazy, they are legitimately different. Seriously, none of them are the same music at all. No, I'm not saying it's like, oh, it's a remaster of a metal album where it no longer has the dynamics. No, it's like genuinely they don't even have the same tracks. And by that I mean they don't have the same, none of them are the same. They're completely different track lists. 2 of them have only 2 songs. In fact, the CD Rip, apparently they're all untitled, but the version on Bandcamp or Spotify, they all have titles. All that aside, this is a Christian black metal album that is noisier than most of the black metal on here, which is like so based, just, let's get some noise for God. Let's get some noise for him. There is very little guitar. There's a lot of synthesizer though, and that kind of fills the gaps in a way that feels a similar atmosphere to what black metal would typically give you. What I really like are the utterly pounding blast beats over the more ambient textures and little bits of speeches and synthesizers. It's so much aggression in this really minimalist tone. Reverorum ib Malacht has done this for years. It's like an anti-combatant and pre-master. If you pit that against this, they're like combating albums where one is like satanic and atheist and against religion, and one is pro-religion, and yet a perspective that is so like intelligent. One thing about Reverorum ib Malacht that is so cool, they understand black metal. They started as a really blasphemous black metal band. If you guys have ever read the articles about a black metal band that converted to Christianity, or specifically Catholicism, after reading the Bible too much to try to be more blasphemous, this is that band. And they didn't do just a little with it. It's not like Horde, where they're black metal, they're so much more. That being said, nothing wrong with Horde, a great band, potentially as great as this one, but it's just such a weird sound. It's truly like eclectic and yet such a fever dream. The vocals that certainly take their time to show up are excellent, and all the textures on here are really cool. You have some really eerie and crazy textures, and Reverorum ib Malacht is not a band to shy away from extremes. I think their album Kyrie Eleison this year was the heaviest album I've ever heard. There's like no guitar on it. It's bass and constant blast beats with reverb. It's insane, and this album certainly was the beginning of that. The bass textures here are like the bottom of logical human hearing and all the sub bass. It seriously is like drool inducing. I was hearing that and I started to just stare off. Powerful stuff. This album, it's not for everyone, but I think it's great. I think it's so genre pushing and interesting, and it's honestly, it's not even my favorite Reverorum ib Malacht record. They released 2 this year that I like more than it, but I think it's so cool. And up next, number 59, Nocturnity's Onyx. This one's sick. It's a Greek album, and I was worried. I really wanted to like this one, and I look at this album cover. Tell me that's not something you want to love. I want to kiss this album the way it's just, dude, it looks so freaking sick. Look at the knight on the cover. Dude, look at the name of the dude of Nocturnity and how he refers to himself as Khal Drogo. You've got your black metal that's Lord of the Rings influenced. Now some Game of Thrones stuff, which kind of makes sense, I mean, I think Tangent. Lord of the Rings has a really interesting sort of bolstering of black metal because both convey mystery. Lord of the Rings is a very mysterious franchise. You have your base level lore, but there's stuff that will never get explained. In like as much as there are clues to stuff that Tolkien never even intended to publish, like in the Silmarillion that ended up showing up, we've got stuff like Tom Bombadil that was intentionally left there to just blow your mind and confuse you. And black metal needs that kind of stuff. It needs like, where did all these vampires come from? Why are these dudes so hateful of everything? You don't need to know everything to understand the atmosphere, all right? And Game of Thrones is a little different from there. There's stuff that's like given mystery, but it's all so far off. But that being said, Nocturne has this very upfront, misanthropic, angry sound to him. It's sort of atmospheric black metal, but it's also kind of banging. It starts off with a lot of really slow tempoed, dark tracks, but then you get a lot of varying tempos on this whole thing. And I love a black metal band that, well, first of all, isn't mid-paced, but they'll just switch between slow and fast stuff whenever they feel like it. It's not seen as like an essential Greek album, but I think it should be. The only flaw on this whole thing is that the kicks might be triggered because they are so heavy. As far as atmospheric black metal goes, this is certainly non-traditional. And instead of being like prideful, it's got like a comfy yet unnerving feeling. And the riffs, as far as atmospheric black metal goes, they go kind of crazy. It's short for sure, but it's got this very unique, dark atmosphere to the whole thing. It's one I'll definitely have to re-listen to in the future, but the way it just sucks you in, and from the beginning to the end, you're just in this weird realm. It's kind of indescribable. I think it's great. I just want to talk about the album cover all day. This has got to be like top 20 black metal album covers ever. It's so dope. Look at it. And of course, to round off 60, Odds Manuk from California with Boso Ragazan. I don't know either. And this is a new album. And you know what? I didn't take any chances this year. I didn't take any prog BS. I didn't take a band that was so zoomer that they decided to just be cringe. No, I took a band that was based 13 years ago and they're based today. The only flaw on this whole thing, which I'm going to have to re-listen to and even deem if it even is a flaw, is the production is very modern. Every element is clear, crisp, and concise. That being said, it's not touched up to death. If you know that this dude probably worked on the Rhinoceros stuff, because I'm pretty sure he did, you can tell. It is well produced for black metal, but it's not so brutally produced. Slightly dissonant, yet very solid and intense riffs. Seriously, these things are catchy, but certainly angular at the same time. The way they just make you crush your face up and squint and just grimace. There are a lot of emphasized portions here. You know, the riffs will have very percussive hits out of nowhere just to give it some real momentum. Now, it isn't insanely unique, I guess you could say, but it's just fantastically written. Seriously, every riff on this album is sublime. And for a band to have such an ambient, atmospheric edge to the whole thing, none of them have ever done it better than this one. The textures are insane. Seriously, like describing them in just this short little review could not do it any justice. And I'll probably have to check out the other Odds Manuk album this year because this thing is great. And finally, number 60, a new album that I took a risk on. I didn't even want to listen to this one when it dropped. And yet I was like, you know what? People say it's good. I listened to it. It's fantastic. It's genuinely great. Go listen to it. Listen to it soon. Listen to it maybe even now, but not quite now because I wasn't going to leave you on just Odds Manuk from California. I decided to give you guys some bonus content because you know what? Duke over here listened to a lot more than just 60 albums this month. He listened to 60 great albums that are primed and ready for this video. First of all, let's start talking. I'm just going to start shooting these off. Melakesh with Sphinx. Do you like Immortal? Well, here you go. It's like Prime Immortal with the amount of crunchy riffs. But if you want it longer than 40 minutes, then Sphinx is your album. The little bit of Egyptian imagery is subtle, and yet it's capitalized on just enough for a little bit of extra atmosphere, but it still feels brittle, a little bit cold at points, and very mystical. The riffs, you know what? In one word, it's riffs. Crazy good riffs. Xasthur, Subliminal Genocide. I re-listened to it because it's been a while, and gosh, what's not to like? It is some rawly produced crushing DSBM. And of all the albums I've talked about today, this is an album. Seriously, you gotta listen to it from beginning to end, so that the first couple tracks, which might not seem that fantastic through their 10 minutes of haze of a dark tunnel, it leads you further into these drunken riffs and just disgusting imagery, and you just traverse further down. And this thing is over an hour long. It is seriously an experience that is meant to be singular. There's a reason this dude doesn't do stuff live, and it's stuff like this. You gotta all the way through digest the whole thing and listen to his wailing vocals and really dissonant guitar parts. It is doomy as heck. But you know what's not doomy? This band that's called the Gauntlet, but this next band is called The Gauntlet, and this EP, actually, sorry, it's War and Guilt, and it's sort of a black and roll thing. And I'll be honest, of course this album cover doesn't look that good. It looks cheesy. How would you expect black metal to come for this thing? The level of aggression and brutality behind this thing is seriously nuts. It's just a motivating, really just beastly album. It's honestly, black and roll has no right being this good. Genuinely, I'll have to cover it some other year again, or at least the band's full lengths. It's actually got the energy. It's got the riffs as well. And I started going through a discography of a band that I didn't know enough about. I mean, I heard 3 of the albums up to this point, but they're just so mysterious. This is a band called Summoning with Minas Morgul. This is sort of the bridging point between their super symphonic atmospheric black metal sound and the black metal stuff off of Lugbers. That's why this stuff has such a weird bounce to the whole thing, with songs like Passing the Grey Company. But the atmosphere is just so mystical and weird that you just gotta love it. If you like martial industrial, that's a band you'll like, for sure. I ended up really liking this album. The atmosphere works really well. And come on, read some Tolkien this month if you didn't already, or read it going into next month, because you gotta show some appreciation for the classics. And a band that was recommended a lot on Mew towards the beginning of the month, Kriegstjorn with Maud Guders Svig. I don't even remember that much about this album, but I know it's symphonic, kind of atmospheric, and it's one of those that's kind of underground on Mew. I hoped to love it even more than I did, but it was very, very solid for what it was. It's got this really weird, lush, almost like Drutk, early Drutk like texture to the whole thing, and yet it's I think it's really cool. The riffs are really interesting, and it's got a really prideful tone to the whole thing. I think it's better if you pair it with like a walk or something like that. I think it is a great album. Just don't expect it to show up on like my year-end list. And after that, I've been working on my abs a little bit this month. I need to get back into that just because I've been taking vacations and stuff. But this is a band called Thai Rock, and this is their demo. All you gotta know is that it's super raw and crunchy and just hurtful. I've been covering some demos, and I liked this one more than the other random one-off raw demos that I've been listening to. And I am embarrassed to say that this next album that I listened to for the first time is Gorgoroth's Under the Sign of Hell. Dude, why aren't more people talking about this one? Okay, I know. It's Gorgoroth. They're a popular band. But this album is insane. Dude, the vocals are the best in the discography. Genuinely. I'm genuinely shocked that the atmosphere is so airtight. I love how Gorgoroth makes their like 30-minute albums and they're just done with it. But honestly, I've always known Gorgoroth as the generic Norwegian black metal band. The one that was too influential, that their sound got so dead so fast. And on Under the Sign of Hell, it could not be more false, because it is the truest of all the black metal albums by Gorgoroth, which is a band that's pretty true. They got like torture allegations, but this album is super intense. It's banging. The riffs go super hard, and the production is very solid as well. It sounds fantastic, and I love how white this album cover is. It provides a kind of a different atmosphere, just because you can't really separate the album cover from the art. Once you see it, it fits. And after that is Drutk with Forgotten Legends. I've never listened to Drutsk debut album until now, and if you like Autumn Aurora, you'll like this one, except honestly I might like it a little bit more. It's just as lush, with a very weird hazy feeling to the whole thing, and it kind of reminds me of more Murray, where it's just so abstract, and it it just blanks you out. But I think it's genuinely a great album. Not my favorite Drake album. I think the next two are probably both a little better each, but it's a really unique atmosphere to the whole thing. And you know, I wanted to get into another band's discography this month. Mutilation. I'll give a quick little display of their 5 or 6 full-length albums. First of all, I'm going to talk about the last one first because it's my least favorite. Cosmic Lunacy, I believe. It's only 4 songs. It's really ballsy. It's just the production doesn't work as well. The drums are a bit too clean for their own good. They don't splash as well into the other mixes. It's like throughout their production, it ended up sounding less blended, which is odd. That being said, the progressive nature of the tracks, the samples are all as great as ever. But let's talk about some bangers, starting with Mutilation's Vampires of Imperial Black Blood. One of the weirdest black metal albums, especially for the time. This is a Les Legions Noir album, one of 2 bands to drop a full-length album, and this is the only band to really matter doing it because they have so many albums. Weird, like 12-minute, like traversal through these dark caverns that are just so bizarre. The riffs on this thing are so abstract and weird. It's truly the most avant-garde album in their discography, and it's one that is challenging. Genuinely, Mutilation is a band that is challenging, and that's why you should listen to it. And then, you know, we go into a re-listen with Remains of a Ruined Dead Cursed Soul, and whatever I said about it back then, it's probably fair. And that being said, it is ever so slightly more tangible than the debut full-length album. It's still weird as heck, but you get a little bit more tremolo here and there. You get a little bit more tangible elements, and it's still as raw as ever. And honestly, it might be a little bit better because of the more approachable aesthetic. But if you want another more approachable aesthetic, you go into their 3rd album with Black Millennium's Grillingly Reborn. First of all, iconic album cover, but these songs are crazy. This album is probably the most straightforward album of their career so far, and it only gets more straightforward from here, with their final album being, of course, the most straightforward. But I think it works really well in this really grisly, dark atmosphere. It dips more into the depressing sound a little bit. It's a bit more aware of itself in a way. Like, it kind of knows it's being weird at this point, but it's such like an irreplicable atmosphere. It's so dark and twisted and gross. And then we get the most underrated album in the discography, and it might be the best. I'm talking about Majestus Leprosus. I could have one album cover, but I'm going to show the other one because it perfectly encapsulates the sound of this whole thing. It feels like spiders crawling all over you. Seriously, the tones of these things and the skittering snare and cymbals. Alliteration's never been my strong suit, but this album really brings it out of you, huh? All you need to do is look at Destroy Your Life for Satan, which is, it perfectly encapsulates like this spiteful, depressed, horrid energy that Mutilation is known for. It's just like, it's a band of pus and bacteria and disgust, and it's in a way that is just unaware enough to make you really believe it, and this is the album to believe it. That being said, if you want something even more gross, check out their next album, Rattenkönig. I believe it translates into Rat King or Rat Queen. I'm really just pulling context clues from the album cover because it's depicting a Rat King, which, if you don't know, it's a bunch of rats whose tails looped together and they can't escape, so they end up starving to death. But this album is filth. Genuinely, just every song, the tones are changed just enough, still in that raw style, to be horrid. What a horrid discography for a horrid band. And I'm gonna probably get a band patch from them. They're that good. But if you want a band that keeps the bad vibes just going forward, check out Lightless Chambers with Chapter 1, Deliberation. I'll be honest, this is a band that isn't the easiest to find in the world, even though they only have a Bandcamp link. They don't even have a YouTube link. But this is where Funeral Doom and black metal are married together, and it's in a way that is so sickening and you just hate everything listening to it, and it's really solid. And next I have a band that I'm a little ashamed to like as much as I did, Moon with Caduceus Chalice. This is a band that likes to copy Xasthur. It is slightly more doomy. If you want a little bit more doom metal drum style, here you go. But it's Xasthur. Granted, it's pretty great Xasthur. It's the best era of Xasthur that it's copying, but it is Xasthur. But shoot, I think this is a band that I'll check out another album from and see if it's a classic, or a classic to me. because that's what matters. Then you get Demiurge from the Thrones of Darkness. Ooh, this band goes crazy because it's symphonic black metal, except it's tough. Genuinely, that's the reason to listen to it, because all of the synths and the riffs, it's such a raw black metal album for how symphonic it is, and yet it's got so much oomph to it. It's got a lot of heft, ton of surging energy, really just aggressive tone to the whole thing, and the riffs are just buzzsaw and fast. Sounds crazy. And I worked out to this next one, Naked Whipper, with Pain Streaks. It's sort of a grindcore influenced war metal album. That being said, you'd probably expect the production to be even worse than something like Blasphemy, and you'd be wrong, because the production is actually as good as it ever should be when it comes to war metal. It is just clean enough to be perfect. I've seen this album cover a lot, but I've never seen anyone really recommend it, and dude, this album's awesome. It's just super aggressive, caveman riffs, and yet so much muscle. And dude, we care about muscle here. And I talked about Summoning before, and I got another Summoning album for you guys. Summoning's Stronghold. Now here's the thing. This is probably not Summoning's best album. That would probably be Let Mortal Heroes Sing Your Fame or Minas Morgul. But this one's really cool because the opening 2 tracks are just the best thing to ever happen to epic black metal. Whether or not that's a sub or micro genre, I don't really care. But this thing, dude, Long Lost to Where No Pathway Goes, as grammatically incorrect as it is just a banger. The atmosphere is so crisp and unique that it's insane. And this album cover certainly helps. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And the atmosphere is so mysterious and weird. And it's about Lord of the Rings, so I gotta love it. But if you want something less eclectic, as the flaw on Stronghold is the female vocals on that one track that I can't even remember. But if you want a little bit more straightforward riffs, just slightly more straightforward and a ton more consistency, seriously more consistent, Let Mortal Heroes Sing Your Fame, also by Summoning, is their next album. And I think it is better, a little less creative, but altogether better. The way everything is more consistent, it's concise as well. You don't feel tired of anything. And yet, as much as it's the same style, it's just little bits of touching up of the EQ in the production makes it fit better. And that's all I really need to say. But we're going to go into something truly innovative now with Sutek Hexen's Larvae. Yeah, it's another Black Noise record, but this one is really interesting as the emotional highs and lows are tied from power electronics to neofolk. And I don't mean neofolk that has a ton of industrial underneath. I mean, seriously, you will lose all of the industrial sounds except for underlying synths just to be smoked out, just to be blown apart by the most emotional and beautiful acoustic guitar. It really makes you question how dissonant and raw the harsh noise elements really are. Maybe they're actually beautiful because they fit so well. It's still a really mysterious and isolated record here, but I think this album is fantastic. It's only 3 songs, about 30 minutes total, but it could be more songs technically, but I think they all work fantastically as individual tracks. And up next is Nelt Wrote Alterity. This is a war grindcore influenced album, which is kind of full of a bunch of modern trends, and it's exactly as heavy as you would expect this trend to be, and it works super well. Yeah, this is kind of a brief little description here, but this is noisy, it's dense, it's like 24 minutes. You blink and you miss it, and it's just flexing. Seriously, it sounds really awesome, but it's just so heavy. It's great to work out to. And if you want a little bit more death metal and a little less grind, I suggest Titan Blood's 7 Chalices. Seriously, this has some doomy, slow death metal sections and some roaring vocals. And that's what I like about it. It's a better lift album overall because it's longer, but it's a little less insane. But if you want something that's truly insane, check out Lifeless Gazes. The Pain Rises Within Flesh, sort of a DSBM album here that is very minimal on the drums. That's all I really have to say about this whole thing, is that the character is derived from the drums. That being said, riffs are solid, guitar tone impeccable, but you've got this sort of weird distorted tone that will build and build and build until you get these really minimalist, dare I say, Ringo Starr influenced drum parts. I don't even know what I'm talking about, but literally just floor tom and like snare, just bop 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 as it's building and building into this huge crash that's never going to come because you're just given just repetition and terrible, horrible vibes. I know this band is like unheard of. They were actually kind of hard to find for me. They were like on the border between like Bandcamp and like hard bands to find, as like you had to look on like a computer or something, and mobile just made it hard. But this was like seriously like a really interesting experience. It felt like post-rock despite all the elements being DSPM at its core. Not life-affirming at all though. Like, don't get it twisted. This thing felt terrible. And next is a band I don't want to pronounce, but Strandhog with Ritualistic Plague, with a little subtitle of Evangelical Death Apotheosis. This thing is banging. Like, it's a banger album here. The way it has so much surging energy to the whole thing, and really cool, more technical death metal inspired riffs. Not tech death, but like death metal is more technical than black metal. It's just got a lot of heft and traditional rock and roll energy. And yet it's like as misanthropic as ever. Like, it's really angry, and the way it progresses is just intense. And there are even like a couple sort of breakdown moments on this whole thing. Blasphemy, I know, but like, come on. Is black metal really going to shy away from blasphemy? Shout out to the Canadians. Next is a band called Sat Krahe with Supreme Misanthropic Dominance. Another really raw black metal demo. One that is not good to do abs to because it's just too depressing. But the atmosphere is utterly pervasive, and it's a really interesting thing here. You know, it sounds awesome. It might be too raw for some of you out there, but then you're filtered and you should go listen to something like Entombed. And next is Cataplexy, Lunar Eclipse, Chaos to the Ruin. Banger. I love saying things are black metal bangers because it doesn't happen all the time. This one is a banger though. I love how intense the riffs are on this one. It's certainly Immortal influenced. It feels a bit like Malakesh in all honesty, but it's darker, more prideful. The blast beats are just flying ahead at Mach speed. Enough about that one. I got Paysage d'Hiver to talk about with Schnee. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't cover all the Paysage d'Hiver releases this year, and this is part 3, and I just needed one to cover, so I decided to cover Schnee, a compilation of singles from the splits and single releases, Schnee 1 through 4. And would you be surprised if I told you this is the most eclectic Paysage d'Hiver release to date? Yes, actually, Imvald didn't have the most amount of eclecticism. Neither did any of the albums. But if you take the eclecticism of probably about 50% of the discography, crunch it all together, you're gonna get it here. Sure, it's cheating because it's a compilation, but I don't care because you've got clean vocals and acoustic guitar on the first track. And other than that, you get stuff kind of like, it's hard to even say. It's like too life-affirming compared to the other stuff. It's not as depressing as Winterkalt, not as like isolating and weird as Self-Titled. You kind of take a bit of the vibes from all over and you crush it all together, and that's what you get. But seriously, it sounds amazing. The acoustic guitar parts, the clean vocals, and the way each track progresses further, and the repetition is just, it's as good as ever. Next is a demo people have been talking about recently, and I just wanted to shove something else in because I'm running out of time. Keys to the Astral Gates and Mystic Doors, self-titled demo. This thing looks super cool, and I listened to it. It's not that long, it's about 20 minutes, and as much as raw black metal can be kind of derivative, this has that manic, interesting energy that I really liked. It gets the kids' toes tapping, and it gets me drinking so much extra punch as long as I can spike it when nobody's looking, because it's certainly on the depressing side as well. And you know, might as well cover something a little bit classic. Arcturus? No, not with a full length, with the My Angel EP. Yeah, symphonic and creepy. If you like Mortuary Drape, then I don't know, you might like this. I don't know you, but I know I liked it. It's really creepy. The way the vocals are so crispy and clear about saying like, this guy loves you, and that like you're his angel or whatever. Seriously, like I'm not joking, that's like what it says. It's like a really weird vibe. And the second track is really good as well. It's a bit more heavy. And finally, because it's approaching really, really late times, a band called Noctum from the United States, a band I actually mixed, and I own 2 of their CDs, both of their full-length albums, and I just decided, I'll just mention the first one real quick. They said they were messing around, but It sounds awesome. You know, it's very Dionysian, if you will, the way things are so off the cuff, how the doom metal parts are so explicitly defined. It's a banger of an album, but if you want something a bit more serious and a bit more straightforward black metal, still with a ton of doom metal energy underneath, and vocals that honestly sound sick. It's got like a little bit of tone and texture to it, which like sounds weird. It's just like he's got some space in his voice for it. Not necessarily roaring, it's still growling, kind of goblin-like, but it sounds really, really cool. And the doom parts make it really interesting. It's an album that feels way shorter than it should be. And, you know, because I said 60 plus albums today, I don't know. I have an older CD. I like Bergtot a lot, but that's about it, babies and gentlemen. It's November. Not only is it November, but it's December at almost 4 in the morning as I finish this. But yeah, you guys enjoy it? I sure did. Seriously, I could go another week of listening to only black metal. I love this genre. I love the passion of the fan base. And I love you guys. And I hope you guys at least like me, like this video, and even subscribe. And if you want to even talk about it, there's a comment section down below where you could do just that. Or even if you want to hate on me, I'd love a comment as well. Or if you just want to say anything at all, do that too. You guys have any black metal you like? Please go to my Discord page in the description and talk to me about it. Seriously, I've been loving talking about this stuff. Or if you want to talk about any music at all, maybe you watch this video, maybe you're the one person that watched this video and it was just like, I don't like black metal, but I'll watch Duke of Italy because he's just so freaking awesome. And to that I say thank you. And to everyone who watched, I said thank you. To everyone who participated in this amazing month, thank you. And to everybody who's wants to watch another video, you know, I appreciate that too. I appreciate you guys, I really do. And it's almost kind of emotional being done with this, but not as emotional as I'm about to be when I hit the hay as I fall into my bed. That's literally right here. It looks so good. But I'd appreciate like and subscribe, comments, questions, or concerns down below. I kind of already said this stuff, but I decided to say it like I always do because I'm a creature of habit. And geez, if you want more social media, I've got my Instagram and my Twitter in the description as well, where I post things. And shoot, that's about it. Have a good day.